Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Laughlin. Thanks for joining us today. We are really excited to have you all with us and hoping to talk with you all about data-driven conversations to improve equitable access through mentoring and induction in high-need schools. This is a part of a four-part series that we have, a four-part webinar series that we've done through the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders that's focused on talent management strategies in high-need contexts. We've been working throughout the country to support states and LEAs in thinking about equitable access and have done a number of projects throughout the country. You see on this slide here, we've done projects in Indiana focused on mentoring and induction, in Nevada and in Arizona focused on leadership, leadership development and leadership coaching, and also some important new work on grow your own and diversifying the educator workforce in Wisconsin and Ohio. So we've done some important groundbreaking work in terms of talent management. In that work, we typically use these three phases to be rooted in implementation science and support our states and districts as they're thinking about choosing a certain evidence-based practice, helping them assess their situation or their context through root cause analysis or through needs assessments, helping them select the right evidence-based practice and then actually prepare to implement that work. In phase two, we support them in implementing that evidence-based practice, and then we work with them to monitor the implementation for continuous improvement. In the third phase, we ideally support our teams in scaling up and sustaining the work, and often in that third phase, we also do fidelity assessments to make sure that the implementation is implemented in the way that we hoped it would. So in this work that we're going to talk with you about today, data-driven conversations, we've walked through the first two phases of this process with our colleagues in the Hawaii Department of Education. And as all of you probably know, the GTL Center is sunsetting. And so we haven't been able to hit phase three of this work at this point, but we hope to continue this work with the Hawaii Department of Ed to support them in scaling up and sustaining this work. And would also enjoy working with any of you in implementing this work as we continue our work at AIR in whatever form that takes. So today we hope to talk with you all about data-driven conversations and this project that we have with the Hawaii Department of Education. As I mentioned, my name is Lisa Laughlin. I work closely on this project with my colleague Amy Kalpo, who's joining me today. She and I worked together, or have worked together with Hawaii for about a year on this project. And prior to this work, I worked closely in Hawaii in an earlier part of my career at the New Teacher Center. I did a statewide needs assessment of Hawaii's mentoring and induction program, and it's probably over 10 years ago now that I did that work. And in that work, got a good sense of the statewide program that Hawaii has run. For those of you who don't know, Hawaii has had a pretty robust induction system for many years. And I've had the good fortune of working with a number of the colleagues that you'll meet today that have been instrumental in the success in Hawaii. And beyond that work, I'll just say briefly that I've worked for the GTL Center now for 10 years. Prior to that, the TQ Center, and I've just been delighted to work with my colleagues at AIR and all of our partners over the last 10 years. As I mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague Amy Kalpo, who has been a part of this team for over a year now and has supported us in developing a lot of the tools and the resources that you'll see here. Amy, like me, comes with a background in education. She's a former special education teacher and serves AIR as a TA consultant. We're both excited to be with you all and share this new work with you. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the GTL Center, as we call it, our mission is to foster the capacity of networks of practitioners, researchers, innovators, and experts to build a seamless system of support for great teachers and leaders across the country. We work with 12 regional comprehensive centers that you see on this map here, and work with the state education agencies that are part of their work as well. So we partner both with the RCCs and the states to support them in programs for great teachers and leaders. So today, what we hope to cover is an introduction to the tools and the resources that we've developed around data-driven conversations. So we'll share those with you, and then we also hope to share with you an example of how these tools and resources have been used in practice in the Hawaii Department, or with the Hawaii Department of Ed, in one of their complex areas, which is similar to what we would normally think of as a district in East Hawaii, and how these tools were really used to improve mentoring and induction in that one complex area that has a number of high-need schools. So that's our goal for today. But before we get started, we'd really like to hear from you. So we have an audience poll that Whitney is going to pull up for us in just a second. And we'd like you to answer the question, to what extent are you using data to assess the quality of your mentoring and induction program? So you see a poll pop up there. Excuse me. And what we mean by data, you can think of that as, it could be an induction survey, it could be teacher effectiveness data, it could be some feedback that you get from beginning teachers at the end of the year. So to what extent are you using that data? I'll give you 10 more seconds to fill that out. And then in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, if you open up the chat box or the question box, whatever you have access to, you can go ahead, if you will, and please type in what types of data you're using. We'd like to get a good sense of the types of data that you might use to assess the quality of your program. So go ahead and use the question box for that. Excellent. I see some answers in there already. And looks like the poll, we've closed the poll, which is good to see. So it looks like the majority of you are using some data. 25% of you are using a lot of data. That's good to see. And then the remainder of you are using a little or not at all. So that's helpful to know. And then we have a number of answers in the chat box or the question box. It looks like retention data, that's good to see. That's important information. Survey data, and then quantitative data. Excellent. Okay. So that's really helpful for us. Thank you for answering that poll. Good to get a sense of where you all are at in terms of using data to assess the quality of your induction programs. So let's take just a couple of minutes to talk about why this work matters. Let me get my mouse in the right place here. So this is not news to any of you, I'm sure, but we know that for mentoring and induction programs to really work well, we have to think about supporting the beginning teachers that need it the most, and to focus on ensuring that we are providing supports for beginning teachers that serve the students that need them the most. And the challenge is that many of our mentoring and induction programs are often built with this idea that we need to support all beginning teachers. And that there's nothing wrong with that idea. So a lot of state programs are built for the entire state. Even district programs are often built for the entire district. What's challenging about doing it with that approach is that often the beginning teachers that are in high need schools need induction systems the most, and they often don't have the induction programs that they need. so it creates a challenge. Beginning teachers come out of their pre-service program excited to teach, but when they go into high-need schools, they often don't have the background that they need to deal with issues like chronic absenteeism or disciplinary issues, or even providing trauma-informed care to students in high-need schools. So they may not feel adequately prepared. They may reach out to a mentor or a veteran teacher in their building, only to find that there are very few veteran teachers in their building. Many schools, as you probably know, high-need schools have average experience levels of teachers that are 2 or 3 years rather than 10 or 15 or 20 years of experience. So those beginning teachers often don't know who to turn to. The research shows us that beginning teachers who do have a mentor, they're less likely to have a mentor than their peers in higher performing schools. But if they are matched with a mentor, that mentor often doesn't work in the same building as them, doesn't come from the same grade level or subject area. And often those conversations aren't focused on the conversations that beginning teachers need the most. So they're not focused on classroom management, they're not focused on lesson planning or instructional improvement. So beginning teachers are at a loss even if they do have a mentor. So we've got to do something more to have targeted supports for those beginning teachers. And we know that when those targeted supports are in place, when a beginning teacher does have a rigorous mentoring and induction program, that can really make a difference for them. It can boost their confidence, make them feel like they can make a difference in terms of instructional improvement, and it's more likely, those factors are more likely to lead to their retention and greater effectiveness in the classroom. So we believe that effective mentoring and induction systems can really close equity gaps. And they can do that by attracting effective teachers into the classroom, by improving their effectiveness, and then eventually by retaining them in the classroom. The mentoring and induction program offers support to these beginning teachers. It often changes working conditions in the school by having a more collaborative environment and having leadership that believes in beginning teachers and the importance of improving their instructional practice. So for all those reasons, effective mentoring and induction programs are valuable and have a role to play in closing equity gaps. But these effects are really only going to take place if we have conversation with school leaders that work in these high-need schools. So having conversations with them where we recognize that the induction program writ large may not be meeting their needs, and opening up the conversation to gaining a better sense of what their needs are and providing the support to create a mentoring and induction program that beginning teachers can use to really work effectively in a high-need context. And that's why we developed the resources that we're talking about here. So bringing stakeholders together for a data-driven conversation around the mentoring and induction program in a high-need setting. So what we have developed here is a protocol and a process by which key stakeholders, meaning state education agency leaders, district leaders, school leaders, induction program specialists or coordinators, professional development coordinators, they all come together for a data-driven conversation that focuses on both process and outcome data. So that can be teacher retention data, induction survey data, effectiveness data, achievement gap data, all of that important data. They come together, they decide what data is important, they select and prioritize that data, and then they create a measurable action plan that is focused on meeting the needs of beginning teachers in that high need school. From there, then the final outcome is that they have an increased understanding of the district's need. So the state and the district and the school all have a better sense of what beginning teachers need to have a high quality induction program. They create a mentoring and induction program that meets those needs, and they ideally have an increased capacity for data-driven instruction, or sorry, data-driven decision-making around that mentoring and induction system. So at the heart of this is a data-driven protocol, which I'll give you a sense of just briefly here, and then I'll turn it over to Amy, and she'll share with you how to access this protocol and the other tools that we have developed for this work. And then we'll hear from Hawaii what they have to say about how this was done in practice in the East Hawaii complex area. So the data-driven protocol, like I said, it's the heart of the work in data-driven conversations. And it's a combination of work that's done at the state level and the district level collaboratively. It starts with planning. So they think about, together they think about the mission, vision, and values of the local mentoring and induction program, and how that may differ from the state objectives or from the district objectives. But what does it mean to have a really targeted mentoring and induction program? What is the vision for that work? They come together to select and think about the data that would be important to bring to the table for a conversation. And then they develop a plan for collecting those data. And sometimes the data come from the state level, for example, retention data or effectiveness data. Sometimes it comes from the district or the school level. So they may have feedback on a survey that is done just at the school level that is collected and then brought to the table for the next meeting. So sections 4 through 6 you see here is usually a separate meeting, a second meeting that the state education agency facilitates, but the district comes to the table. All of the district and school team, they come together, they analyze and interpret the data. In that process, they look for trends in the data, and they prioritize areas of challenge and areas of strength that they can leverage as they build out an action plan. So the 6th step is to develop an action plan that's done collaboratively, and it's really focused on finding solutions for improving the mentoring and induction program for beginning teachers and in the high need schools in this context. And then finally, the last step, section 7, is around communicating this work. We know that an action plan is only as good as it is in communicating to other people and actually making some change in the system. So the final step is in communicating this work with additional stakeholders and continuing the conversation between the state and the district and the school for regular check-ins where they work together to make sure that the action plan is actually going into place. So I guess all this to say that this protocol itself is valuable in that it moves us from having a statewide approach to a one-size-fits-all approach to mentoring and induction, and really gives us the opportunity to have deep and meaningful conversations about how mentoring and induction works for beginning teachers in high need schools. So I'll turn it over to Amy, and she'll talk with us about how to find these resources and how to access them on the GTL website.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. So the work we're covering here today is focused on the 8th module in the GTL Center's Mentoring and Induction Toolkit 2.0. Module 8 will be released on the website later this week and will include the Mentoring and Induction Data Protocol that Lisa's been talking about, This protocol was based on our pilot with the Hawaii Department of Education and then updated to be used universally. It will include an anchor presentation that summarizes research and best practices. It will also include handouts that provide supplemental information and team tools to facilitate discussion. And one of the team tools includes a PowerPoint shell that can be customized and used for facilitations of sections 4 through 6 of the protocol. It's important to note that this module can be used in places where mentoring and induction systems need to be developed, or where M&I systems are already in place but may be functioning inconsistently in terms of quality. So for those of you that have problems but might need a way to, for those of you that have programs but might need a way to improve mentoring and induction in high need settings or in settings where teacher attrition or teacher shortages are a challenge, these resources may be of interest. We also have 7 other modules in our toolkit that we encourage you to check out at the link provided on this slide. The GTL Center's Mentoring and Induction Toolkit is a ready-to-use resource for states working closely with districts to build strong mentoring and induction programs. The purpose of the GTL Center's Mentoring and Induction Toolkit is to give regional comprehensive centers and state education agencies tools, resources, and support to facilitate meaningful conversations with local education agencies about the design and implementation of effective, high-quality mentoring and induction programs. The toolkit materials summarize research and best practices, highlight relevant examples, and provide streamlined processes for action planning. And as with the upcoming Module 8, all modules include anchor presentations, handouts, and team tools. In addition to these resources, the GTL Center can also provide technical assistance for all of the modules in this toolkit. GTL staff can help your team identify and customize the right resources from the toolkit to achieve your state's mentoring and induction priorities. So you can make requests for Word versions of handouts and team tools. All of them are posted in PDF format on the website, but if you would like Word versions, you can use this link to request them. You can also make requests for one-on-one consultation with GTL experts to learn about customizing the toolkit for your needs. This screenshot here shows the landing page of the toolkit. On the right side, you'll see some of the tabs to access each of the 7 modules. And once we have our new Module 8 posted, there will be another link there to click on. At the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a link to request technical assistance support. You can fill out that form if you'd like to learn more, or if you'd like to talk to the GTL Center about how your state can create strong supports for new teachers through comprehensive mentoring and induction. We have the link to access the TA support request form on this slide. I would say we would put it in the chat box, except I think with this platform, I think we can put it in the chat box, right, Lisa? Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure. Yeah, we'll make sure before the end of this webinar that we will put these links in so you can directly click on them and access these web pages and our mentoring and induction toolkit. And before we turn it over to the Hawaii team, we want to pause for another poll question. So Whitney will launch that. We want to know, do you currently use a data-driven process to make decisions around your mentoring and induction program or other programs in your context? Yes or no? So go ahead and take a few seconds to put in your answer. All right, and then here we go. See the results? Okay, so currently we have 70% that say no, they're not currently using a data-driven process to make decisions. So we're glad you're here to hear about Hawaii's experience with this. So we're very excited to have the team from the Hawaii Department of Education here to share about their experience piloting the data protocol and using a data-driven process to make decisions regarding their mentoring and induction. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol Tsukamoto, and she will introduce herself and the rest of their team.
Good morning. Hi. Thank you, Lisa and Amy. We're really happy to have the opportunity to share some of the exciting work that we were able to do with GTL in piloting the use of this data-driven protocol. Before we start, I thought we'd share a little bit about our team. I'm Carol Tsukamoto. I'm the educational specialist for the Hawaii Teacher Induction Center. I've been here with the center for about 5 years now, and I lead our professional learning networks for our induction coordinators, as well as lead the work around program development and induction resource advocacy, both physical and human. Joining me is my colleague, Carrie Shimamoto. Back in 2011, Carrie spearheaded the establishment of the Hawaii Teacher Induction Center and a statewide comprehensive teacher induction system for the Hawaii Department of Education. She collaborates with national and local partners so that we can offer innovation and new design to our induction programs so that we can remain responsive to local needs and also try to remain on the cutting edge of effective induction practices. Also with us is Robin Tanaka. Robin is our state resource teacher. She's been at the center here for 8 years now, and she serves as a mentor, but she also trains new mentors across our state and provides program consultation and coaching. Carrie, Robin, and myself are all based in Honolulu on the island of Oahu. Joining us from across the sea is on Hawaii Island is Casey Hanoa. Casey is our induction program coordinator for the East Hawaii complex areas. She's been responsible for developing and implementing East Hawaii's induction program for the last 4 years, and she works very closely with the complex area leadership. She works with principals, mentors, and beginning teachers. So we're all really honored to be with you to share our story. I wanted to share a little bit of context about the Hawaii Department of Education. We're both a state education agency and a local education agency, and we're a single district state that's spread across 7 islands. Now, what we call a complex area is comparable to what many states consider to be districts. We have 15 complex areas, each with a complex area superintendent who reports directly to our state superintendent. In all, we have approximately 180,000 students in our system, and on average, 1,400 first and second year beginning teachers who are supported by over 600 mentors. Now, we've established a statewide induction program since 2011, and we're guided by our Hawaii Teacher Induction Program standards. Now, while we have a state induction program, we find that induction programs in some of our low and geographically isolated schools are not really given the special attention that's really needed to ensure that our new teachers have those supports that are required to teach in these really challenging school environments. So when we started this pilot and had this opportunity, we carefully selected a complex area that was going to participate in this protocol that had a high population of high need schools that were also geographically challenged. These complex area schools have persistent challenges with staffing and low performing schools, and these are schools that are identified by ESSA as continuous school improvement or targeted school improvement. So we met with the complex area superintendent and his leadership team and the induction program coordinator to share more deeply about the data-driven protocol and the goals of the pilot to see if they would be interested in participating. Now, upon committing to the pilot, we determined a potential timeline for our work. So Casey Hanoa, the induction program coordinator for East Hawaii, is now going to share some background about her complex area.
So as you can see on the slide, the East Hawaii district is broken into 2 complex areas. The Hilo Waikia complex has a total of 13 schools, and we have the Ke'au Ka'u Pahoa complex, which is a total of 9 schools. So together, the Hawaii district has a total of 22 schools. 100% of our schools in the Ke'au Ka'u Pahoa complex are identified as TSI and CSI schools, which is targeted school improvement, or continuous school improvement schools. We have a total of 136 beginning teachers in our complex. 70 of them are year 1 teachers and 66 are year 2. We have 64 school level mentors, most of which are classroom teachers. The 22 schools, if you look at the map, are spread apart geographically, with the furthest school being 63 miles outside of the main town of Hilo. And so there's some challenges that these rural schools face. And one of those challenges is that we have a high teacher turnover in these schools, which then creates a sense of focus for continuous improvement around teacher effectiveness to ensure student achievement. Majority of the teachers in these areas are new with less than 5 years of experience. And although our state has a robust induction and mentoring model with a wealth of resources and supports, those that are in these rural areas don't always get to benefit from these resources and opportunities. So on the next slide, going through the GTL process with key stakeholders was instrumental in making sure we invited diversified voices into the conversation. Therefore, our complex area superintendent was extremely strategic when selecting these team members. He selected team members that were viewed as influential and decision makers. So as you can see on the slide, in addition to our GTL facilitators, the state induction and mentoring leads, our complex area consisted of our complex area superintendent, our deputy complex area superintendent, our induction and mentoring program coordinator, which is myself, our district educational officer who oversees the induction and mentoring program, and 4 school level administrators, 2 vice principals and 2 principals. So I'm going to now turn it over to Robin Tanaka, who will take you through the process and protocol.
Okay, thank you, Casey. So as you can see from this slide, we broke down the 7-step protocol into 3 sessions. In the first half-day session, we covered sections 1 through 3. Highly recommended to do this in person. So in step 1 of the planning, we convened stakeholders for a half day in January to come up with a shared I&M vision, mission, and program goals for East Hawaii. And then in section 2 of the protocol, in the selecting phase, it really helped us to identify sources of data that would be most influential in program transformation. So then on the next slide here, the next slide, Lisa, thank you. This is an example of from section 3, where we collected, cleaned, and organized all of the data and really put it into manageable, digestible pieces in prep for the full day convening with all of the stakeholders in April. We put together certain data pieces together to create this outcome table. So you can see the schools, student demographics, the median growth percentile, number of beginning teachers, retention rates, and then which schools were the hard to fill schools. But this was helpful in preparing us to focus our conversations around issues of equity when looking at our induction data. Okay, and then the next slide. So the second session was a full day where we worked through sections 4 through 6 of the protocol. For section 4, analyzing, what was helpful was that prior to this day, Lisa and Amy really supported us with developing reflective questions to ensure the conversations were rich and provoked deeper thinking around the data and its connection to the identified goals. In section 5, interpreting the data, we had a chance to identify and prioritize challenges for improvement and where's the positive areas to leverage. The GTL facilitators were instrumental in helping us to synthesize the findings and helping the group not only get distracted by personal opinions and perspectives of the data. And then they made sure that we filtered extraneous factors that could have detracted from the goals. And then for section 6, acting, we spent a half day following that full day convening where Casey, the induction program coordinator, state leads, and Amy and Lisa, and then we used the key findings and agreed upon next steps to incorporate into the action plan for East Hawaii's induction and mentoring program. So Casey is now going to share a few examples of their program goals and the communication phase of this process.
On the next slide, you can see that some of the goals that were shared out was the first goal being to build a capacity of mentors that are fully prepared to support beginning teachers with instructional coaching strategies and tools. Therefore, it was extremely important that we, our administrators were understood and valued the mentor selection criteria process and also the mentor recruitment strategies that shared. And then another goal that we shared was to increase new teacher retention in all schools with a focus on the lowest performing schools and hard to fill schools in these remote areas. And one way to address this goal was to create a diversified calendar of events that would allow access to our program supports and resources. So on the next slide, you'll see a snapshot of our action plan. And this is just a little snapshot of our action plan. But once our action plan was complete, then my administrator and myself shared the action plan at a principal's meeting. We also did follow-up school visits with the administrators. So this actually opened the doorway to clarity because it allowed principals to ask questions and we were there to answer them. But having my administrator present when sharing this action plan was extremely important and strategic because it showed leadership commitment and also a priority to program implementation. One thing to keep in mind when sharing your action plan is the timeline that's involved. The GTL process actually takes you through a timeline and makes you aware of the timeline, but you also want to be aware of the school level timelines, such as their financial and academic timelines. The next slide, I'll turn it over to Carrie, who will actually take you through some of the big takeaways and early successes.
Okay, thank you, Casey. So we came away with 3 big takeaways. One, the process of selecting, collecting, and cleaning all of the data was rather time intensive, though it resulted in many positive outcomes, like more informed stakeholders, rich dialogue, and concrete next steps for ongoing program improvement. The second big takeaway was really around selecting an influential leadership team. That was critical, having the superintendent, district leaders, principals, vice principals, and of course the coordinator to participate in co-creating program goals and data-driven conversations led to a customized action plan that stakeholders were now all vested in to increase the likelihood of more successful implementation. And then the tri-level collaboration of the state, our complex area, and our schools surfaced a shared interest on not just a successful program, but on the real needs of schools, which resulted in greater cooperation of the principals. So everyone came away realizing that we have the same goals and we're all committed to making sure every student has the best possible teacher in front of them. Our school year started here in Hawaii in late July. So I'd like to ask Casey to share some of her exciting early successes that have resulted from this data-driven protocol so far.
So yeah, as a result of this process and making induction and mentoring a priority, we've seen some early successes that I'm extremely excited to share because all of these successes that I share have never been seen since I've been the program coordinator. So the first is our complex area utilized the mentor selection criteria to hire 3 district-level full release mentors to help support schools. So we have 2 special ed district-level mentors and 1 general ed district-level mentor. All 3 of them have a caseload of 10 beginning teachers that they mentor. Another success that we see that I'm extremely excited about for our complex area is mentors and beginning teachers are paired together and identified within the first week of school, which means our beginning teachers are receiving mentoring supports at the most crucial time of the school year. So that's extremely exciting for our complex area and our beginning teachers. And another success that I see is a lot more principal engagement in induction and mentoring. Principals are using the mentor selection criteria and mentor recruitment strategies, which is extremely exciting. On the next slide, it talks about some of the next steps that we have for our complex area. And the first is implementing goals specified in the action plan. So we are currently rolling out a diversified calendar of events. And to explain a little bit what that diversified calendar of events looks like is in the past, we would offer, in order to ensure that our beginning teachers are paired with trained mentors, we would offer mentor training. But we'd offer the mentor training only once a year, or each session once a year. And so instead of expecting our mentors to attend the training the one date that we offer, we're actually offering multiple dates so that there's opportunities for the schools that have limited resources to subs that are in our remote areas have more of an opportunity to attend these trainings. And then the other next step is collecting data to monitor the success of our program. And so some of the data that we plan to collect is around teacher satisfaction, teacher retention, and mentor preparedness. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, who will take you through the next steps for the state.
Thanks, Casey. So we had an opportunity to recently share the data-driven protocol and this work with our executive state leadership. So our Assistant Superintendent of the Office of Talent Management and our Leadership Institute Director, as our induction program, our induction office falls under the Leadership Institute. So we discussed how the protocol might be used with other complex areas and determined that we would need to consider optimal entry points for introducing this rather comprehensive protocol. We will continue to monitor and, of course, support East Hawaii with the implementation of their action plan throughout this school year, and we'll report back to our state leadership at the end of the school year to share the process and outcome data that we're going to be collecting to determine how to best leverage and use this protocol with future areas. So at this time, we'd like to open up the session for any questions you may have.
Sorry, I was on mute. So please feel free to use the chat box for any questions that you have. It looks like we have also unmuted all of you. So if you want to chime in and just ask a question, feel free to do so, and we'll put the line in. It looks like Alexander, if you're on the line, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be helpful. We're getting some background from your line. Otherwise, anybody else have a question or a comment that they want to share? All right, it looks like we have a question from William Cook. How did you decide who would be a mentor?
Lisa, I can't hear you.
Yes, hi Carrie, we can hear you. Sorry, I think we just had a little audio glitch, but the question, and if you didn't hear, how do you decide who would be a mentor?
Oh, okay. So, we have 15 complex areas, in the state, and so each one has a coordinator. So it's really depending on the induction program mentoring model. So if it's a full release model where we have full-time mentors coming from like the district or complex area, it's the induction program coordinator along with their supervisor or the complex area superintendent that will select the full-time mentors. In some complex areas, we have a lot of school-based mentors, and in those cases, the principals select. So we have a pretty rigorous mentor selection criteria and process that we use to encourage principals to really look for not only their most effective teachers in their schools that have evidence of great practice, but also have mentor-like qualities.
Excellent, great answer, Carrie. And I'll just chime in here too and say that if you're interested in developing a mentor selection criteria process for principals in your districts or in your state, I think it's our second module in the toolkit that gives you a process for doing that. So if you're interested in that, it's on our website now under the GTL Mentoring and Induction Toolkit. It's module 2. Let's see, we have a few more questions. And I'll just say, it looks like we tried unmuting everyone, but it didn't work very well. So you're all muted again. But if you do want to chime in, you can raise your hand. If you use the hand icon, then we can call on you and unmute you. But we do have a couple of other questions in the question box. So let's see. Well, just a nice compliment. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate your work in Hawaii. So important, and that they love the toolkit. That's nice to hear. Thank you for that. Are you using the new Teacher Center model and tools for mentor training and the overall program? Do you want to answer that, Carol or Carrie?
I will. Hi. Yeah, we are still using the new Teacher Center curriculum for our mentor trainings across the state. One of the things that our leadership was adamant about was making sure that the quality and the fidelity of implementation of the mentoring program was going to be consistent across the state. So we are partnering with the new Teacher Center to continue to use the professional learning series to support the development of our mentors. In addition to the professional learning series professional development, we also have complex areas who support their mentors with ongoing mentor forums as opportunities for the mentors to come together in a community of practice and get support from one another. And that is that professional development is designed and implemented by the complex area induction program coordinators.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol. So I think that covers it in terms of the questions that we received. If there are other questions that pop up, please feel free to add them to the question box or the chat box, and we can field those as well. Carrie and Carol, I was wondering if you would both want to just share with us what you thought maybe was an important factor in your early selection process. You shared a little bit about that and kind of the importance of having a complex area superintendent that was really, interested in the process. Is there anything else that you would say, to folks listening in that you would recommend for finding a good place to start this work? Did you hear me, Carrie?
Yes, we're sitting next to each other. I'm like, do you want to take this? I think,
you're like,
and we kind of shared this in our presentation, but I don't think this process would have been half as successful or effective without the complex area superintendent and the leadership, his deputy superintendent, and in kind of messaging why this work was important and selecting. He really was strategic in selecting the principals and vice principals who participated in this data-driven protocol. And by strategic, I mean he thought about maybe not always the most supportive principals when it came to implementation of the program, but even principals who maybe were not as engaged in it, or maybe had their own, challenges. So, they were developing some of their own systems in place in their schools. And so I think having a range of principals and vice principals participate in the protocol was really helpful. And now and it was of course spread out geographically from the 2 different geographic areas of the East Hawaii Complex area. And having done that, I think was really wise in that now as Casey is implementing her program, she now has principals from all of these different areas that are able to support her when they share at principal meetings. When she shared at the principal meeting, the action plan they came up with, she has principals in the room who were there to help create it on behalf of the other principals and are able to also speak and support her in that as well. So I think that's a key place to start is with your leadership.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you.
And I do want to just add, if I have a few minutes, I just do want to say that it was critical that when we were identifying the complex area to work with, that we had the commitment from the superintendent of that complex area, simply because we don't think the protocol would have worked as well if it was something that was being pushed in, but it was rather something that was embraced by the leadership, and having his commitment and his physical presence at all of the sessions was really important, because having that presence showing his commitment in word and action was really critical, instead of it being messaged like, this is important and now you go and through the process on your own. So I just wanted to add that.
Excellent, thank you, Carol. Yeah, it's clear that that was an important piece of it. And I also want to just reflect on the fact that having all of you there, having folks from the state being really open to this conversation, having folks from the complex area and the region, having Robin there kind of overseeing this region, and then Casey there really on the ground, providing the induction support and thinking this through at all different levels was really valuable. And I just want to say kudos to you all for taking this opportunity. You know, these conversations are not easy ones to have. And for those of you listening in, you know, you can imagine there are, you know, a handful of high need schools maybe in your state or even in your district. And those high need schools are typically the ones who have a lot of accountability pressure, have a lot of history and baggage as it comes to their relationship with the state. And this process aims to really break that down and present an opportunity for a really meaningful conversation. But it's tricky, and everyone going into it kind of knows that that's the history, and I think having open-mindedness and recognizing the value that this can have for beginning teachers in these schools, that is really the foundation that this group had. And just want to say that you guys are a great example of how this work can be done. And we hope that those of you who are listening in see that this is not only just a data-driven process, but it's also a very human process where you have to have your heart and your mind in it to make it work. And I think I just want to thank the Hawaii team for doing that so well and helping us with this initial work. So with that, it looks like we just have a few minutes left. So again, if you have any last comments or questions, feel free to jump into the chat box. I'll move us forward. We have one last polling question. We want to ask you and get a sense of whether the schools in your state might benefit from a data-driven process like this. And if so, would they be beneficial for your continuous and targeted support and improvement schools, schools with high teacher turnover, both of those types of schools, or maybe no, you don't think that this would work? And if your answer is no, we'd love to hear why, if you can fill that into the chat box as well. We'd love to get a sense of whether this would be useful in your high need schools in your state or in your district. So go ahead and fill that out. We'll give you maybe 10 more seconds or so to put an answer in there. All right, so it looks like, yeah, both the CSI and TSI schools and schools with high teacher turnover, which are often one and the same, but not always. So that's great to see. And we got no answers, which is what we were really hoping for. So that's great to hear. Thank you very much, Whitney. We can put that poll away. So thank you all for answering that. Just as one final note on this question, the resources that we have shared with you today will be on our website. The Module 8 will be up and ready to go soon. But in the meantime, if you want to reach out to us, our contact information is on the next slide here. Actually, I'll talk about the feedback survey first before I get to our contact information. But so just briefly, we would love to hear your feedback on whether this webinar was useful to you or not, and whether the resources would be useful to you in your context. So please go ahead and click on this link to the SurveyMonkey survey. It should take about 5 minutes or less to fill it out. And just thank you in advance for taking the time to give us your feedback. And then finally, we just want to thank you for joining us today. We hope this work is useful to you and that the example that we shared in practice is useful as well. Our contact information is here. Should you want to talk about how to use these materials in your context, we would be more than happy to talk with you about that and share with you our lessons learned, and also think about how to contextualize these materials for your state. So thank you all for your time. And with that, I'll just thank our team from Hawaii again for joining us. Carrie, Carol, Robin, and Casey, thank you all for your great work. And we look forward to working with you all in the future. So thank you all for your time, and we'll meet again soon. Take care.